I've been in dogs since 1991. We breed dogs that we want to train. I was out here in western Nebraska riding Harleys and training dogs. I don't sugarcoat anything, and if you don't like it, tough.
Welcome to another episode of the Flatlander Kennels podcast with Chris Jobman. Today we're going to go back to the Flowchart and answer some user questions. Chris, how is it going tonight?
Oh, it's going. You know, it's another day in paradise training dogs all day, but we have beautiful weather. We've had some unbelievable rain. You should see it up here, Elliot. It might be the greenest I've ever seen it. It is absolutely gorgeous.
Beautiful.
It's gorgeous.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah,
we need rain all over.
We needed it bad. We needed it bad. So $1 million rain, it helped us for sure. But so
wonderful.
Let's go. You know, I'm gonna try to keep this kind of short and sweet here. I need to get to bed, but our next level of progression is cold blinds, and this is gonna be very, very simple. Whether you're doing land cold blinds or water cold blinds, the very, very beginning part of cold blinds, we usually don't go too far, like 50, 60 yards, and just, you know, you got to have a lot of patience when you do this. You can't expect your dogs to do all your perfect litter or casting. All you want to do is that, say your blind's at 12 o'clock, whether it's land or water, your blind's at 12 o'clock. Let's just say it's a 100-yard cold blind. And you can start out a longer cold blind, and if you do that, when you kick the dog off, make sure that you walk up and follow the dog and don't just leave it out there at 100 yards and hope for the best. You know what I mean? So shorten the distance up, you know. That helps them a lot. And let's just say the cold blind's at 12 o'clock. Don't try to now, if your dog does it, great. But don't sit up there and nitpick your dog to look perfectly at a cold blind, like perfectly where you want them to go. If it's at 12 o'clock and your dog is looking at 11 or 1, kick it off. Kick it off and then just handle out, because here's what's going to end up happening is they're going to sit up there and they're going to start bugging, which bugging is when the dog looks left, looks right. They don't want to lock in on that spot. And then the longer that you sit there and nitpick them, then they start getting nervous, and then bugging gets worse. Then it becomes avoidance. Then it becomes a habit, and then you're in deep trouble. So just get them close and kick them off. And then just handle.
Can you talk about the body mechanics of the trainer body mechanics of the blind?
Everybody's a little bit different. You know, you're talking about how I set them up.
Yeah, how you are, your hand, your body, their spine.
Yeah. So I like to set them up, your tail to nose straight, right? That's the biggest thing is alignment. And I don't put my left foot forward because that crowds them. I stand close. I stand kind of back towards where their hips, you kind of meet their body in that, you know, that flank area. I kind of stand right there, and my feet are square. And then if I need to, I put my right leg forward just a little bit to push them left, pull my right leg back and say here, it pulls them to the right. And I don't like to crowd them up by their head and their shoulders. I think if you do that a lot of times, if you crowd the dog too much, your first initial line on these dogs is away from you. Mm-hmm. So instead of going to 12 o'clock, they shoot off to 10 o'clock because they're trying to get away from you. You know, you force them, so they understand that. A lot of times these dogs will shoot off to 10 o'clock, and it's not their fault. It's you've crowded them, you know, and it shoots them left. And with Georgie, he would shoot off to the right, but at 2. But I stand back by their flank. I give them their head. I give them space so I can pull them and push them. And then they just seem to be more comfortable that way. Because a lot of times these young dogs, especially if you hover over the top of them, it makes them nervous. Okay. Mm-hmm. And and also when you start casting, don't expect a lot of really good literal casting. And what I mean by that is if you give them a 20-yard angle, you know, don't expect to get a 20-yard angle. All you're looking for is you're looking for a relatively good initial line. You're looking for really good, quick, crisp whistle sits. And all you're looking for is change of direction. That's it. So that, you know, they're going to start like this. That's what it's going to look like. And eventually it's going to go like this. And eventually it's just be like this. It'll be nice and smooth. But when they first start out with cold blinds, you're going to get some choppy work. And because here's the thing, when you first start cold blinds, you want really good change of direction. Because in my program, we've talked about this before, is we don't run white buckets or nothing like that. We teach running straight through handling. And when you first start out, your first cold blinds, it may take you 8 whistles on a 100-yard cold blind. In a couple more weeks, it may take you 4. Another month or 2, it may take you 2. So it just gets better and better, and you have to have a lot of patience as a trainer to do this, because everybody wants that badass dog that runs dead straight, wide open, sits on a dime, changes direction. That doesn't happen overnight. That happens over lots of time, lots of blinds, and like I said, all you're looking for is good crisp whistle sits, a decent initial line, and change of direction. That's it. And
what kind of distance would you start off with?
What's that?
What distance would you start off with the cold blinds? Okay.
But when I say that, like earlier I said 50, 60 yards, but you got to understand something. When we start out with cold blinds, and when I start out with my cold blinds, I'm really not running them in the marks either. So if I have a marking set up, and let's just say I have marks, going off the left side, my first initial cold blinds for these young dogs is going to be out of the marks, completely out of the marks. Or not even close to marks, just running cold blinds. Because what you don't want to have is when your first initial cold blinds, you don't want to have a ton of suction on affecting marks. And the next thing you know, you're nicking them and getting them off there, and when they're not quite ready for that. So what we do a lot of times, and this has been fantastic. We're doing a lot this year, is we call them bird boy blinds. And the dog's been through all the program. He's been through the whole thing. He's running cold blinds. Let's just, Tanner takes them out. We're just running cold blinds this afternoon. They're running cold blinds. What I've been doing to teach these dogs how to handle the marks and handle the suction is, let's just say we have a 10, 12, 3 marking setup. And I got blinds at 10:30 and 1:30. Okay. And Tanner trains with me every day with my big dogs, and he's got the young crew. And what we do for the young crew, they're running cold blinds. They're pretty proficient at a 100-yard cold blind without marks. But you start adding marks to it, then they start getting confused. And what we do is we have like Jammer or somebody that works for me drive over. We do a bird boy blind. So he drives over to both blinds before we even run the marks. He comes to the line. He drives to the right blind. He'll go, hey, just like we do a pattern blind. He'll throw a bumper into that pile. He'll stay there, and Tanner will go back. He'll send that dog to that pile. Okay? Then he'll drive over to the other blind, do the exact same thing, back, send the dog to the pile. Then we'll throw the marks. Okay? And then when we come back, then we run them as cold blinds, which now they're technically pattern blinds, right? But we've taught the destination, and when you start whistle sitting and you start doing correction, you start casting, that sort of thing, it's so much easier on the dog. They'll take the cast. They'll do everything they want to do because they know where they're going. So if you use your corrections and everything, it's much easier on the dogs mentally to do this. It's so much easier mentally to do this, and we do weeks of this, or maybe they're running. If we have a really really hard blind, we'll do the bird boy blind to teach them the destination. Now we'll do a few weeks of that, but it helps them with their momentum and mentality is so much better. But I will when I say that, once they're proficient at that and they're doing that well, stop doing that and go right to cold blinds. Because what you don't want to teach the dog is to run back to the damn blind all the time, missing a mark. So that's just a few weeks of that to get them comfortable running inside the marks and then quit.
So with what you were just talking about with the bird boys, that's after you've done some cold blinds outside the marks. As you start going inside the marks, that's when I'll even introduce the cold blinds outside the marks too, and do that same thing, and start teaching behind the gun blinds, that sort of thing. But yeah, we do that for a few weeks. It really, really helps them. It really helps them. Now, how quick are you? What is your expectations as far as the line? Is it pretty much the same as once you start cold blinds? Is it pretty much keep them tight, or do you let them run to get them out a little bit?
I give them leeway. When you first start running cold blinds, don't overhandle your dog. Don't worry about the line to the blind. Too many people worry about the damn line to the blind. What I mean by that is, let's just say the wind's blowing right to left, and it's a crosswind blind. Bird boy blinds are a fantastic way to teach crosswind blinds, fight the factor. And let's just say, you're trying to teach the dog to handle in the wind, and the blind's at 12 o'clock. If you give like a shallow angle and the dog is going to 1 o'clock or even 2 o'clock, but fighting the wind really, really good, it's got the lead, really fighting the wind hard, let him roll. Let him take that cast. Let him take the cast all the way down and then stop and then put him at the end of the blind, put him on the blind, because you want to reward that behavior of fighting the factor. That's the only way you teach a dog to fight that factor. If you went tweet, 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 you're not teaching them anything. All you're doing, you're controlling every step they've got. And so you want to let them roll with that wind, and you teach them to think and actually have to fight a factor on their own, and then it rewards them.
Yeah, that one piece of advice, that correction that you gave me that really helped, is that I was over controlling Georgie on her blinds, and you told me let her run. And once I started doing that, because she just wasn't running straight and hard enough right off the bat, and I was controlling her too much. And once I just let her run more often, it really corrected that. And then let her get out and then finish the blind from out there instead of just controlling her every single way.
And then when you run a test, you can hold them to a tighter line, and they understand that. But like I said, once they're young, let them fight that factor. Don't worry about the lines of the blind. Who cares?
Yeah. If you're going out by yourself, let's say I go out by myself and I'm just working on blinds, do I just want to run each blind once, or is there ever a reason to to run the same blind twice?
If it goes really, really, really bad, you could rerun it. But if it takes you 4 or 5 whistles and it's a really nice controlled blind and they're taking every cast and they're doing it, there's no reason to rerun that. Because here's the problem that you have. If you run an AKC test and they make you run the blind first before the marks, and let's just say you go out to go get the blind or go get the mark and you run right back to the blind, you're out. That's an old fault. So if you keep rerunning blinds, that's what happens. The dog just runs back to the blind and then you're out. So there's no real reason to rerun that blind unless it's really, really bad. Unless it's really, really bad, then you can rerun it.
Can you talk a little bit about how to handle cast refusals and when to get involved with corrections? And
when you're first starting to run cold blinds, try to always err on the side of caution. And what I mean by that is don't get upset or frustrated and start hammering on your dog. Use a lot of attrition, use a lot of low pressure stimulation nicks and stuff, and be very cautious of overdoing your corrections. Let them work it out and let them figure it out, and use a lot of attrition. Like I said, low level stuff. And now use more pressure if you need more pressure, but always err on the side of caution and try to be real, lenient when it comes to that sort of thing. But what I do know is you can still be firm on whistle sits. Sit means sit, and don't worry about the loopy whistle sits when it comes to that. And then when a cast refusal happens, then you need to think about what's best for your dog. And like I said, always err on the side of caution when it comes to that. We use a lot of attrition and indirect pressure.
I know you've talked about indirect pressure in the past, but give a review of indirect pressure.
Indirect pressure would be, so let's just say you gave a right angle and they scallop straight back. Indirect pressure would be sit, tweet with a whistle, then it would be pressure, then it would be recast. So you're giving direct pressure on the sit, but in turn that indirectly affects your cast refusal. So it's almost it's almost like a reset to them, if that makes sense. And it kind of gets their head out of their mind, and they'll go where you tell them to go after you do that. But when you do that, be very, very slow down. Don't go tweet, Nick, cast. Go tweet, let them sit there, give them a correction. Let them sit there and absorb it, and take it, and then cast. Don't go real fast, because that doesn't do anybody good. It just makes it worse.
And for level of pressure, I know for me, I've got to see some little. On her correction, I need to see some little small physical reaction for her to actually, for it to be enough to me to get the response that I want.
And if they yip, they yip. It's just noise. But like I said, I run 1s and 2s mostly. I will go higher if I need to. But if you do it right and your timing's good and your whistle sits are good you'd be surprised what low level will do. What low level will do.
Yeah. I know on my sport dog, so out of the 7, I know there's more than 7 levels, but there's on the dial there's just 7. And Georgie can handle a 7. I almost never use it.
Yeah.
But 3-ish, 4 is kind of the range for her where I'll get the desired response that I want. If it's 1 or 2, typically she's like, eh.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. And just so when you start running cold blinds, just be very lenient and cognizant of their mental state, and don't try to push too fast on cold blinds. It takes a lot of cold blinds to run cold blinds really good. So just be lenient and just be mindful of your corrections. Just let them build and mentally grow up before you start really, being really fine line and literal casting, and that all will come.
Because being overly harsh can really break a dog down on a blind.
It can really hurt their blind attitude. It can really, really, really hurt their blind attitude. And everybody loves to watch a dog run 50 miles an hour on a blind, flying around as fast as possible. I understand that. I hate that. Beta runs wide open, Flash, all the dogs. I would much rather see a dog run 50 or 60% of their speed on a cold blind, and because they're telling you they're part of a team.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying?
Yep.
I like that. It's a lot easier to handle them. I mean, wide open, especially when it comes down to like really hard casting and fighting suction. Once they slow down, they're letting you know they're part of a team, and they're accepting. There are no whistles coming.
And what should you see from their nose? Their nose should not be on the ground.
No,
right?
They should be up. Their head should be up, running. If their head's on the ground, they're hunting, drag back, or whatever they are going out there. You can tell a dog when they're running a cold blind. You can tell a dog that is running a real blind retrieve. Their heads up, they're running. They're running in line. Heads not down. Their tails aren't really wagging. They're not really hunting on the way out there, like this, hunting. Those dogs that do that, they're not really running a true cold blind. You can tell a dog that when he knows what dead bird back means. So.
And we're talking with the first cold blinds. We're staying on land, and at what point do you transfer
water
into
or land?
mix?
Either one. It's the
Doesn't
same.
matter. Okay.
It's the same mentality. It's the same process. You just be careful in the water. Some dogs get bad water attitudes, that sort of thing. But the whole thing about running cold blinds and your correction is all timing. It's all timing. What I don't want to see people do, and I don't like to see people do, is when you give a right. Say you give a right angle, and the dog goes and scallops back, and then you just nick them. You just get onto them with a collar and blow the sit whistle. And then you give a left, and then they go left, and they go back. Then they just get onto them with a collar. Then they do the sit whistle. What ends up happening with those dogs is eventually they'll quit moving. They'll just sit there and not move at all. Because they don't know where to go. No place is safe. They have no idea where to go. Okay? And so what I like to do is, if you give a scallop, you gave a right cast, and it scallops backwards, straight back, stop them, recall them to you, which is attrition, stop them again, give them a low pressure nick, which is indirect pressure, and then cast again. That's how I like to do it. That's how I like to do it. And not all dogs, there's like the Amazies and the Kimbers of the world. They don't take a lot of collar pressure. I very, very, very rarely lose a collar on them. They're actually better with attrition than they are any kind of pressure at all for their mental state. And so those dogs, I don't hardly ever use pressure on them. I use all attrition, and that seems to really work good for them.
So you do all the same processes. It's just there's never a nick involved.
No.
Just the point when you call them back, sit them, they know they've screwed up.
Yeah. So.
All right. Anything else about that before we hit a couple questions?
No, I don't think so. It's pretty easy and self-explanatory, but just the biggest thing about it is you just have to be cognizant and lenient. You don't be too harsh. Don't expect too much right away. And it takes a long time to build a really good blind running dog.
And your average dog, if he's trained at Flatliner Kennels, what age is he going to be? If you've had him through the whole process.
So if they started at 6 months old, I don't know. They're anywhere from a year to a year and a half when they start running cold blinds. It all depends on the dog.
Yeah.
All depends. That's a hard question.
Can you give an amateur advice? So an amateur who wants to hunt his dog, but hasn't gone through all of this process yet. Do you have any advice for them in the field? Like just stay away from blinds altogether. Don't use blinds out hunting until you've gone through the whole process.
Yeah, you have to run cold blinds. You can't just after let's say your dog is through the tee, then you're like back. They're not ready for cold blinds. They're not even close to ready for cold blinds. So yeah, so if you're working on cold blinds and you come into hunting season, try not to handle them because all you're going to do is confuse them. Don't put them in those situations because that's just super. They're not ready for in the field cold blinds yet. It takes a long time.
In my experience, especially at those early years, they're about half on a hunt. They're about half of what they are when you're training.
For sure.
I mean, they just completely break apart.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. So,
all right, I'm going to jump in here for a second. You're listening to the podcast episode where we talked about simple cold blinds. Chris had some things pop up at the kennel that we had to abruptly stop that podcast, and we are doing part 2 of that right now. We're going to do some Q&A questions. So Chris, you ready to round out this podcast?
Let's do it.
All right. So we're going to just jump right to some questions here. This one comes from my personal training partner. I need you to put a lot of thought into this one because this is about setups. He's the one that decides all this because he's like one of those like student of the game guys. He's like studies this, loves it. I got too much time in my life to like what setup I going to do today.
He doesn't worry about teal season as bad.
No, he is like all in. You would love this guy. I would love to bring him out to FLK sometime. You would love this guy. He's a banker. So he's like, I don't know if I can get away with it. Anyway. So yeah, a lot of thought. Here's what how many multiples do you throw throughout your week of training? If you were an amateur with 1 to 3 dogs, what would your training regiment look like for the week if you had time to train once a day? And I know you interacted with him on Facebook and asked him for more information. And then he came back and said, what about if it's a dog fresh out of the basics, which he does have a dog that's 1 year old, pretty much fresh out of the basics, running its first cold blinds, doing short singles well. Number 2, season level dog transitioning to finished. 3, master grand crew. And of the week you can run a setup only 2 to 4 days out of the week. Should water be more of a focus than land? Then 2 to 3 days you can run drills or short pattern blinds at the local park. How are you making the most of your sessions?
That's a big question.
That's a big question.
Here's the thing before I get into it. Here's the thing about any kind of dog training. Anybody that knows anything about dog training that's good at it, it's all about balance. You have to have a good balance. And if you say you want to run more multiples, and I very seldom do I run a true triple. I'll maybe run one triple every couple of weeks, maybe even 3 weeks, because you got to remember a lot of my grand crew and master crew, they're running lots of tests right now. So in a weekend test, they're going to run multiples, right? Every series of the multiples. So then once that starts, then you got a lot of head swinging starting. You get a lot of that sort of thing. And so a lot of times we'll just do singles off of multiple guns after a test and get them refocused and going where your eyes tell you to go, not where your nose wants you to go. But if you have a dog struggling with maybe like a check down bird, I would do that like as a delayed triple. Or if you got a dog that struggles with a long check, a long punch bird, that would be your delayed triple. That would be your first bird out. That would be your main focus. I do that quite a bit. I run lots of singles. I do, but when I run my singles, I usually like to do bird in the mouth, give it a little bit harder, a little more focus. I may know off of a mark, go run a blind or two, come back, pick that mark up. So you are working on memory a little bit without all the head swinging you get with running lots of multiples. And I know he's talking about an amateur with 1 to 3 dogs, and you get time to train. That's a really, really good problem to have because you could focus a lot of time on just 1 or 3 dogs. Or it could be a curse. You're overtraining and you're putting too much on the dogs because you have time. So that's where you, as a trainer and a handler, you've got to figure out what a good balance is. So if you have a dog that, your dog's struggling, not all amateurs, so don't beat me up over this, but a lot of amateurs, they like to focus on marks and they love to watch a dog run fast and go get them. And lots of people, and it's for a number of reasons, whether it's lack of facilities, time, that sort of thing. You see a lot of amateur dogs struggle in the water. And that's where we see, like, you're in a qual, you're in a mash test. That's where the rubber meets the road, is in the water. And it's funny because, and I've said this before the podcast, everybody, when they come to the kennel, we have so much water here. They all want to, let's run water, let's run water, let's run water. And that's all they care about. Well, their dogs struggle on land, so why are you concentrating on the water? If you can't do it on land first, don't worry about water. But I don't know if I'm going to answer this question correctly for you, but it's all about balance. You got to have a balance. Now, when it's hot out, right? When it's hot out, you're going to want to we do a lot of land water combos when it's hot out. One side will be water, one side will be land. We do them both. Or we do a lot of water just because of the heat. Let's just say question number one: a dog fresh out of basics, running his first cold blinds, doing short singles as well. You're not going to run a lot of multiples with that dog. And if you do, you need to have somebody throw for you, because so you can have a winger on one. If it's, let's just say we're going to teach them doubles, you can have a winger as your go bird, a hamster as your memory bird. That way, when they go out for that memory bird, if they struggle, your helper can help them, and you're not handling. Okay, that's one way to do that. You could run, if you had just wingers only, you would run your memory bird as a single first to teach it, then put it together as a double, and that would be your memory bird. Okay. A season level dog, it's all about balance. You could even start making season level dogs head swing if you run too many multiples. So you've got to be really careful. And I know he wants an answer. How many multiples we throw during the week of training. It all depends on what we run. If we're running a lot of tests, we run lots of singles. If we have a lot of time in between tests, we start doing multiples, and we start teaching concepts. Hip pockets, mom and pops, flower pots, down the shore, 2 down the shore, 3 down the shore. So we start teaching lots of concepts if we have time to work on those between tests. What you don't want to do is, if you're running a lot of tests on the weekends, you don't want to start throwing multiples at them all day long in training, because now your marking will actually get worse. They'll start head swinging more, and they're going to start missing marks. Now you have to handle on marks. They have to get help, and they'll start losing their confidence. So you need to run lots of singles if you're running lots of tests, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it doesn't really matter where your dog is in training, where it's coming out of training. It all depends on what your dog wants or not wants, but what it needs. So if you're seeing your dog doing a lot of head swinging at a test, then you need to run more singles. If your dog struggles with a check down bird, you can make that in like a delayed triple, or vice versa. There's no, when it comes to this dog training stuff, and everybody knows this, there's no set answer. You have to read your dogs. You have to do what's best for your crew of dogs. And there may be dogs in your crew that, maybe need to run more multiples, and some of them need to run singles. So the ones that need to run more multiples, maybe the day we're doing singles, those dogs maybe get a multiple or two. And the other dogs get singles, or vice versa. You just never know what they need until you just gotta have good balance. It's all about balance. That's all I can say. It's all about balance.
Yeah, I'll say for amateur, the good water is just so hard to come by.
And unless you're training with a trainer that's really good around the water, especially tech water and stuff, if you don't know what you're doing, you can cause a lot of damage. They start cheating, and if your timing's wrong, and you give a correction, and then they freak out, and they don't want to get in the water, or they don't want to get out of the water. So it's all about balance. And a lot of the amateurs and stuff out there that don't have the good water, and it's not their fault, they just don't have the good water. They've not been taught how to do it in the water. Mm-hmm. That's where they struggle, because they just don't know. They just don't know. We're blessed here to have tons of water, tons of tech water. We get after it pretty good when it comes to that stuff. And every dog is different, so you just have to have a really good balance.
So on water, do dogs tend to struggle more on marks or blinds, or just both? Just water in general?
Just water in general. I always tell everybody water is twice as hard as land. Yeah. I tell everybody that it's twice as hard as land. Now, if your dog is struggling on hip pocket marks on land, don't expect them to run, a tight setup on water very good if they can't do it on land. So you got to make sure some of these tight marking setups that you see on water, they can do it on land first. The down the shores, watermarks, that's a big deal in master. That's a tough concept. We work on that. We should work on it more than we do, but it's all about balance. And if you have dogs that struggle in the water, you have to run in the water. That's all there is to it. And I wouldn't be throwing the kitchen sink at them in the water either. I would, maybe run lots of singles in the water with those dogs that struggle in the water and teach them the right way to tackle things, the right way to angle in, angle out, stay in the water, get out of the water. Those dogs really need to be taught and taught well. There's some dogs that are just naturally good in the water. They're just really good at it. They know when to get in, they know when to get out. Other dogs, they want to cheat it every chance they get. And those dogs like that, you have to work on it more.
And you may have already answered this, but an add-on as far as the multiples, you don't really run many true triples, but
I don't.
Delayed triples, double doubles, throw a bird off, run a blind.
Yeah.
You do a mix of those.
I do. And I've been starting to do a lot more when we're running singles. I like to run the ABCD drill real tight. There's also, if we run singles, I like to know off of a mark, go get a blind, go get that mark, that sort of thing, just to work on some memory without running an actual multiple.
Right. All right. Thank you for the question, Cole. All right. Next one, Adam Harper. How often have you seen an over-under marking concept in a finished test? I trained for this concept a good bit, but saw it in a finished test this past weekend. I guess
an over-under. Is he talking about like directly in line, one at 6 o'clock, one at 12 o'clock, or is he talking about one throwing from like 9 to 3, and then the other one throwing like 3 to 12? You see what I'm trying to say? I don't understand.
In my mind, actually, I saw out at the Wyoming test, one of Adam was running Flash out there, and Flash had an issue with what I think, if I'm not thinking right, then maybe I'm thinking of inline. I'm not good with all my technology or with all my terminology, but we had a short one that went left to right, and then a farther one that went right to left and landed under that arc of the first one. Yeah. And it was really hanging dogs up. Is that what he's talking about with an over-under?
He might be. And the judges that do that, and they make the long bird, the go bird, that is a terrible setup. That is a terrible setup as a judge to judge, and it's very confusing for the dog because you got to understand something. They give them noses for a reason, and we're testing hunting dogs. So if you're throwing a short mark and then the go bird, the line to that go bird is under the arc of the short mark, that's a terrible setup because now, let's just say your dog peels off and gets the short bird. Okay, that's going to happen 99% of the time. Now you got to punch up underneath there, and I see a lot of people that train like that. When those dogs peel off of that short bird, they get into it like no. Well, now you're teaching that dog to shut off his nose, right? And now when you got a dog that goes and tries to get a short check down bird, some of these dogs take that to heart and they don't want to check down, and because they just got in trouble for it. So if that makes sense, so your balance has got to be really good. So if he's talking about over and unders, how we teach it is, and it's one of my favorite concepts to work on. I'm talking about an over and under. To me, is a bird throwing from 9 to 3, and then having another bird either throwing like 10 to 12 or 2 to 12. That's the first bird out would be your 12 o'clock bird. Your second bird out would be your bird that goes from 9 to 3, and you pick up the 3 o'clock bird and you punch under and go to the 12 o'clock bird. I love to do that concept. I do that. I love to do it. I need to do more of it. That's one of my favorite concepts to work on because it's so hard. So if that's what he's talking about, you need to work on the memory bird, the 12 o'clock bird. You need to teach that as a single, and then you add it as a double. And then you pick up the 3 o'clock, you punch the 12 o'clock. If you have a thrower that's helping, which is the best case scenario, if you've got a young dog that you've picked up the 3 o'clock bird and now you look out to 12 o'clock and they look confused, all you do is have your helpers come out, go, hey, and fake a throw. Fake like you threw a bird, get their attention and go, good, that's it, right there. And then that helper gets them to that spot where they need to go without you intervening and without you killing confidence.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that test where I think it was Copa that was running Flash, and
Yeah.
he was like 5 dogs ahead of me, and he had to handle Flash. That didn't help my nerves.
Yeah,
At all.
they all don't get them,
It's
and
like,
I'm going to
holy crap.
tell you, some of these dogs that are a little bit older, like him, that have been through have seen everything. They hate to run the same line. They hate it,
Mhm.
and
Yep.
that is really close to running the same line, and that can really screw them up because they're just not comfortable doing that because they've been in trouble for it or whatever. And I don't even get in trouble for running the same line just because I know we have to do it. They just learn with age that they're not supposed to, and it just comes across naturally.
Well, Georgie was feeling cocky that day because she didn't have to handle. She outdid her dad on that. That's the one time in her life she's going to outdo her father.
Ignorance is bliss. Sometimes when you overtrain, it's like sometimes these younger dogs, they'll kill marking setups like that because they don't know any better.
Right.
They just run to where the bird was at and like, I'm going to go get it. And then the older dogs that have seen every concept and have getting in trouble for here and there, they're like, oh boy. So they start overthinking a little bit, and their training takes over their brain. With them young dogs, they just run because that's where the bird was at, and it was the greatest thing ever,
Yeah. Before we go to the next question, I was on a float trip this weekend, and we were talking dogs. I was talking he's interacted with you, Stormy Crook, who's interacted with you. He's got a dog. He's trying to get and everything. And I was talking about your dogs, and I've been enough tests now, and we were talking about how some trainers' dogs run robotic. And I was like, man, Jobman's dogs do not run like robots.
No.
And it goes all back to that whole intro of like thinking dog. Like in that situation, like Flash is actually thinking and going through things that you've taught him. It's like not this robotic dog that's fearful of the person that's running them.
Correct.
I love that. I love that about your dogs.
Yeah. And like I said, we try to teach a true thinking dog without pressure. We just teach it and they just learn it eventually. And like you said, these dogs that are robots that had a lot of pressure put on them, when you get to those really tough marking setups that are really tight, all they see is stress and fear. That's it. And then when they start doing that, you're screwed because they start overthinking everything, and everything is scary to them, and they don't know where to run to. If they're confident, and if they make a mistake when we're teaching it, it's not a big deal. It's like, no, here. Throw it again. Let's teach it without a bunch of pressure. We do a lot of rethrows, that sort of thing, to teach that stuff. And those dogs that are confident like that, they run so much better. Well, yeah, will they make a mistake? Yeah. But you know what? In the long run, you're going to be way better off with a dog that's confident and not scared of those tough marking setups. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to figure it out.
All right. Well, and one thing that you've taught me, and I was talking about this weekend too with some amateurs, it's like, can you read your dog enough to see when your dog's making the decision? Now, there's one example that always sticks out in my head when I was out at Flatline. There was a water setup close to the house where the moment the dog made the decision, you waited for him to make the decision. It's like reading your dog and seeing when they're actually making the wrong thought decision versus like on that blind out at Flint Oak, you're like, well, she didn't make the decision yet. You stopped her. She hadn't made the decision yet. You didn't give her a chance.
Yeah.
And it's like that mindset is so powerful in the training because like you're not training a robot. What choice did they make? They make the wrong choice. Then you teach them that was the wrong choice.
And how we do it is, and we've talked about this before, is some trainers, like just say you're going to run a down the shore water blind or down the shore marks or whatever. Some trainers will let those dogs get to the bank, give them a correction, and then put them back in the water. And then they're scared to get out. They're scared of everything. They don't want to get out of the water because they just got in trouble for getting out. What I do is that the second I see their head turn towards the bank and they've made the decision to go to the bank, that's where I intervene and I change their mind instantly because it's more fresh in their mind. They're not scared of the bank. Their decision was just changed, and you changed it for them without a bunch of pressure. And if I have to give pressure in that decision and that to change their decision, a lot of times it's really low pressure, 1s and 2s, and that's it. Now, if I have to give more pressure because the dog's more stubborn, I will. But we always err on the side of caution when it comes to that sort of thing. And eventually, lots of repetition on those marks and that concept will get you where you want to be without a lot of pressure.
So I want to ask you a question. We're going to go to Robert in a second, but I don't want this to fall out of my mind because I'm so curious about this. You don't do very many breedings. When you do a breeding, why? And is it because you see qualities in two dogs that you think would be great paired together? What brings you to do a breeding, and what are you looking for in those two combinations to put together a dog you want?
I try to do my breedings with, so let's just say you have a dog who's a good marker but not a great marker, but is a really good blind runner, which is, that happens a lot. Some dogs like to be told what to do, some dogs don't. And then you have a dog that's, let's say the female is a good marking dog, not a great marking dog, but a great blind runner. And your male is a great marking dog, but maybe a weaker blind running dog because he's more stubborn. That's a good mix to me, because you got the great marker to the average marker, you got the team player to the non-team player, and that's what I want, that mix. Because so one strength of a dog is the other one's weakness, and strength of the other dog is the other one's weakness. I try to fix that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So during training, do you just have moments you're like, oh my gosh, those two dogs, I want those two dogs? Typically, I think a lot of times it's flash, but not always. You're like, does it just hit you like those two dogs together?
Yeah,
I want to see what they produce.
Our personal dogs, and I'll be like, we're going to get ready to do a breeding. We're going to have some phenomenal breedings, client dogs and personal dogs coming up. And we've already got stud dogs picked out. And I just think they're just going to match up really, really well. And if you have, like, just say your sire of your litter is a wild man at the line, and he makes noise and, all those things, and your female does the same thing, that's the last thing you want to do is put them together. Because you're going to get that. You're going to get that, and you're going to get stuff you can't control. Right? That's the last thing you want to do is put them together. So like I said, I try to put strengths and weaknesses and strengths. I try to do that and try to have the best puppy that we can possibly think. And I also, what I like to do is, let's just say your male, your stud dog is not overly smart, but gets the job done, loves to do it, and has got a ton of go. And let's just say there's a female who's a little bit of a worrywart, a little bit more timid, and makes mistakes because it's not giving you 100% of the effort all the time. You want to blend those two, where the power of the male and the go of the male offsets the timidness of the female, and then the timidness of the female will offset some of the boldness and craziness of the male. And you're going to get in that litter, you're going to get some dogs that are on the high end of the spectrum when it comes to power and go, and you're going to get the ones on the low end of the spectrum like the mom. But in the middle, you hope to get most of the litter. They offset each other. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
And that's why we did Flash and Isla. Because Flash is a maniac. Now, he sits at the line fine and all those things. And he's kind of a maniac. He loves to go. And Isla is rock steady at the line, never makes a peep, goes where you tell her to go, doesn't run overly hard, but hard enough. And she's a thinker, and she's really, really smart. So that's what you're getting with Georgie and Red and Linda and all them dogs, is they've got the power and go of Flash, but they got the thinking ability of Isla. And don't get me wrong, Flash isn't stupid. It's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying Isla is extremely intelligent.
Yeah. That's the pair you like. Like, we've got Flash here. Let's infuse a little more calmness, a little more a little boost it up, and you can get just some super puppies out of it.
And I don't worry about, and there's a lot of breeders out there that worry about, and we're going to have some breeders on here this year, I hope, come on as sponsors, but there's a lot of breeders out there that care about color, and because people want yellow dogs, people want chocolate dogs. I don't care about color. I honestly, I don't. I want to breed the two of the best dogs that we've got to each other that are going to complement each other really, really well, and those are the puppies we want to train. I don't worry about color.
Yeah. I mean, you have your preference, but that's not.
I have my preference. Black on black, that's my preference. But I don't breed chocolates just to have chocolates. I don't. Now, if there's a great chocolate dog and we have a good one, then we'll breed them. But I don't worry about that, because that's the problem with people in color when it comes to chocolate dogs and yellow dogs. All they care about is breeding to another yellow dog or breeding to another chocolate dog. And that's where the chocolate dogs got a bad rap down the years, because they're bred just to chocolates, just to have chocolates. When you start breeding recessive gene to recessive gene to recessive gene to recessive gene, you're going to have problems. So you need to breed the best possible dogs that you can have. And I understand what the breeders are doing, because people want specific colors. I get that. I'm not a breeder. We have 1, 2, 3 litters a year. That's it. And those are the dogs we want to train. And the breeders that we work for and train for, we try to steer them down the right path as well. to help their out, because great puppies will sell themselves. Now, yeah, you're going to get people, hey, I want a chocolate. Well, we don't have one. Well, I'm going to go someplace else. That's fine. Go someplace else. Great dogs will sell themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, let's do one more question. Then we're going to shut this one down. And then the next episode is all going to be Q&A. We've got a bunch of questions on here that we want to get through, but we love if you guys add more. And you can submit questions at 2 different places. Now we've got the Instagram account, and every week there's 2 or 3 shorts where I'm taking out little snippets of these podcast episodes and putting it on my Instagram. The Flatlander Kennels podcast Instagram. Then there's also a Flatlander Kennels Instagram as well. But if you want to see the short of the podcast, go over to Instagram. You can submit questions to me over there. You can contact me over there and Chris, or also on the Facebook group, the Flatlander Kennels podcast Facebook group on Facebook. So let's go ahead and do this last one and then close it down. This is Robert Wisdom. I have an 18-month-old started dog. I am having difficulty with whistle sit. I am following the book Training Retrievers to Handle. He knows to sit on the whistle, but he has a very slow sit and won't sit when I kick him off for a retrieve. Any suggestions on next steps?
Well, see, this is the problem we have with some of this stuff is now I don't know all the facts. What kind of basics were done? Did you use a rope and set the pile? When you say kick him off on a retrieve, are you talking about an actual retrieve? Or are you talking about a blind retrieve? So there's not enough information here, but what I would do is, let's just say all the basics were done. Sit the pile, force the pile, tee, all of it was done. Pattern blind line and casting, all that was done. I would go back to sit the pile and use a long rope on that and get them to sit quicker. And then from there, I would go to pattern blind lining and casting. Because here's what you don't want to do is just start running blind retrieves with that dog out in the field and then starting to fix your slow whistle sit by getting onto them with a collar. Now they're going to get a crappy attitude about running blinds because they think they're in trouble for running blinds and not just a whistle sit. So you need to break that down and simplify it as simply as you possibly can. And we just got this dog in, Teal is her name. She's from Ohio. She's a fantastic little dog. Loves to do it. She was started by William Walker out there, owned by a really nice guy. Chris is his name. And she's a super, super nice dog. But she's a finish level, and her whistle sits are slow. She's got a loopy whistle sit because she's got a pile of momentum. I'm talking pile of it. She's gonna be a player. But we've gone back to sit the pile with the rope, and then we've gone back to pattern blind lining and casting. That's what she does in the mornings. And then in the afternoons, when we're doing our marking setups and blind running setups, we are transferring what she's learning in the handling field to the field. And it's helping her a ton, along with keeping her momentum and her enjoyment and love of what she does without beating her up too bad in the field, because we're simplifying it in the handling field. So I would go back to sit the pile with a rope is what I would do.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and close this one down. And then, like I said, the next episode will just be all Q&A.
Perfect. All right, guys. Thanks for listening. See everybody at the line. Take that in.
Gotta strike this chord with the humble hearts, bearing heavy chains and blue collar scars. Inevitably, they're gonna get their way. If it don't take that fight, take it.